Today, I'm going to be helping you guys learn vintage sports cards. It's become apparent over the last few months and also at the National, a lot of modern collectors are now pivoting or adding more vintage sports cards to their collection. I'm starting to see Mantle, Mays, Clemente, and other baseball superstars from the 50s through 70s in collections of guys that only collect modern cards, which is a great sign to see because there's so much more to the hobby than cards produced the last 5 years. However, there's so much more to vintage than 50s through 70s baseball. So I felt this video was pretty necessary to teach people a little bit about the history of vintage cards, how to avoid different types of scams, and much more. So start by niching down. You can look either at a sport or non-sports category and also an era. And each different sport has different times of cards being produced. I'll give you an example. Football cards. The first football cards were Mayos in the 1890s. Then there's a few different pre-war sets like the National Chickle, but really the majority of vintage football cards are going to be through your 50s and 70s. However, like a sport like baseball, there's tons of releases in the 1800s and also early 1900s all the way through today. So you could really niche down if you wanted to. There's collectors that just focus on Old Judge cards. And if you don't know Old Judge, they produced cards from 1886 to 1890. The 86 cards, way too expensive for me and a lot of other collectors. You're talking about 5 figures plus, really iconic set. I covered it in my national videos, but the 1887 through 1890 cards of Old Judge that look like photographs, there's diehard collectors on that. And there's even books like documenting all the different types of cards, scarcity, and much more. People think the T206 card set is difficult. Old Judge is on another level because T206 cards, at least you can find it, shows Old Judges. They are so tough, but there's collectors that niche down specifically on that set, or there's collectors that focus on specifically 1800s cards. I'll give you another example as well. Boxing. Boxing extremely popular in the 1800s and also in the early 1900s. There's collectors that'll go after in the early 1900s exclusively like Jack Dempsey or Jack Johnson or a Sam Langford, and really focus on that specific era. Or if you go into 1800s, you look at someone like John L. Sullivan, one of the greatest fighters of that time, or a George Dixon. Again, there's so much to explore and all the sports out there as well. It's not just baseball, football, basketball, and hockey. There's people that collect tennis cards. Like I said, boxing. You also have soccer that has an extremely rich history. There's even running cards. Like whatever sport that you like, I guarantee you that there's cards out there for it. So go out there and explore, find an era to focus on, and buy some cards from there. Now, one of the things I like the best about vintage cards is the research side of things, because you're not force-fed all the information. You can't go watch a break and see the different cards that are hit. You're not going to put on the TV and see these players on your television playing live. You're not going to go online and see fully complete checklists all the time. You're going to have to actually do some research and digging, and I find that fascinating. So there's a few different ways that you could actually research sports cards. There's a lot of books that people have written. You can go through forums like Net54 or Blowout, or you can go to databases. So you can use like Trading Card Database or the PSA website. Again, these aren't all perfect sources. Not all the information that you find online is correct. And I'll give you some examples in a little bit, but this is a great starting point. From there, also, if you go to card shows, if you see a dealer with a card that interests you, have a conversation with them. Most vintage dealers know so much about their sports cards. That's where I find out a lot of my information. Just having those conversations, really great way to go. Also by networking. And I know a lot of different collectors that specialize in different sets and eras, but I just wanted to give out 2 quick examples. And these guys both also have YouTube channels and also have Instagram as well. So I'll link them down below. First off, we have Ian Collects. Ian is one of the best European collectors I know. Anytime I have questions, I just ask him and he can tell me so much about it. It's awesome. And like really incredible PC as well. And then we have also El Rey Collection, who has one of the best, I shouldn't say one of the best, he has the best Negro League baseball card collection or baseball memorabilia collection in general. And then also he has a huge soccer collection, which just won a PSA set award. So I'm going to give you guys a quick example of like researching a little bit behind the scenes process and kind of show you as well that these sites aren't perfect. Great tools to get you started, but there's a lot more research that needs to happen. So we'll start with Trading Card Database. Here's the website, tcdb.com. Love it. You go over here, you scroll down for whatever sport or non-sport that you want to do. We'll just go over here for boxing and we'll put in Joe Louis. one of the greatest boxers of all time. If you're getting into boxing cards, you're welcome. Just taught you something. So go over here for Joe Louis and click over here. Now, trading card database is missing some of his cards. Over here, then they have 2 listed for 1935. I believe he has 4 or 5 rookies. He has this card, which is a full-size one, which I picked up at the National in 21. Show you guys that. Pretty cool card. He also has a mini, which I don't see listed over here. He has United Tobacco, which I just grabbed one of these this year at the National. No image there. And he has a few other cards as well. So Joe Louis right there from 1936. I think PSA says it's a 1930 card, which is wrong. I believe that 36 might be correct. I have to do a little bit more research. Mitchell's and Son Gallery of 35. This is a 1936 card. I picked one of these up at the Dallas Card Show before. But you can see some other examples. This African Tobacco, extremely tough card. I want to grab it one day in my PC. But you can click over here and click more. And sometimes they have images that are populated. Other times they don't. But you can see some other stuff. This is a great entry-level card right here. This Joe Louis. I see a lot of these for sale all the time. Both of these are. These are plentiful sets. But not too expensive. Cool cards to grab. Autographs isn't too expensive as well. This card's always pretty cool, the Leaf, but it is a little bit pricey. But a really cool website, right? Because you can see the images right next to the year that they're believed to be. Again, take all the years with a grain of salt because not all the information that you see online is correct. We go over here. We'll type in Joe Louis as well. And we'll go to all other. And I'll just show you guys an example. So, for example, right here, the same exact card, Trading Card Database said it's a 36. PSA says it's a 32. If you look at Joe Louis, he made his boxing debut in 1932 at the age of 17, but this was all amateur. There'd be no way that the card would be printed 2 years before that. So I would believe that the Trading Card Database could be correct. Again, you got to research the card specifically, try to figure out more information. But it's not a 1930 card. That is not his true rookie card. That's incorrect. There's a postcard as well from 1930. Again, if he made his first fight 32, that's not possible. But his 35s are the first rookie year. There's a bunch of different cards over there. But you can see PSA has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different examples of the rookie. Like I said, compared to Trading Card Database, which only had, I think it was 1, 2. So more examples over here, and you can see the mini versus the full size, the UTC over here as well. And these are extremely tough to get. Some older PSA slabs, I believe, say these are 1930 or 32. Again, I'm glad they're updated now, at least here on the Pop Report to 1935. But it's all about research. If you want to see what this 1930 card is, let's see if there's been a sale of it. Let's see. There's been no sales, unfortunately. But we can at least see what the Strangler Lewis looks like. No, Strangler Lewis. One of the best wrestlers of all time. So this is what the card looks like. Really nice. And okay, so not a specific year on there. They just say 1930s in general. But yeah, no image on here for what that looks like. Should be right here, but no card image available. But that's a little bit my research process. I mean, if you're trying to look for like the first card that someone has, see what Trading Card Database does, see what PSA has, and then actually read the bio on someone, see when like they first debuted or had their first fights, at least for boxing, music wise, see when they released their first album or started touring. Another, like there's other examples of Elvis Presley and also Michael Jackson that have wrong years. Just show you that real quick. If you go over to the Michael Jackson, the rookie card that PSA has, the Victoria Vedette, it's actually a 1973 card. It's not a 69. His first card's a 71, Bergman. And then Elvis Presley, just double check with that one as well. So it says his first card was 1952. I don't believe that's correct. Go over here, Elvis Presley. So like, let's see where his first song was. His first recording was in August 1953. Right? He aimed to pay a few minutes of studio time to record a 2-sided disc as a birthday gift for his mother. So there's no way he has a 1952 card when he didn't record a song until 1953 and didn't become famous until a little bit later. So like, 1954 Sun record. So hard to believe that these 52 or 53s are correct, assuming this over here. But it's more about like the research process, looking at the specific person, figuring out when they started becoming famous, when they would have a card produced on them, and trying to really figure out the specific year, because there's not a lot of information about some of these different sets. I mean, especially if they're some of the European releases, they might not be documented as well as they should be. But this is the fun part about collecting. Anyways, back to the video. So just like modern cards, you're going to have to get a lot of your vintage sports cards graded. However, like on the vintage community side of things, it's really divided. You still have a lot of people that don't want to get their cards graded because they're either in binders, like full complete sets, or they want to touch and feel their cards. Plus, grading is expensive. A lot of these collectors have been collecting 30, 40 plus years. And if you're going to send all those in at $20 or even $30 a pop, you're going to have to sell cards, which we'll go to that a little bit later. But a lot of vintage collectors also don't want to sell. So there's a little bit of a divide on the vintage community on grading. However, I do want to give you some tips. Now, on the pre-war side of things, I'd really stick to two different brands for grading. It's either PSA or SGC. If you look at the slabs that the T206 Hannes Wagner in, to my knowledge, I believe it's only those two companies, and a lot of other larger cards that I see at card shows or also on marketplaces are going to just be PSA or SGC. Now, post World War II, there's really four brands that you're okay with holding cards with that are graded. You have PSA and SGC like from before, but you also have CSG and you also have BVG. BVG graded a ton of cards past World War II. I don't know specifically what's going to go on with that brand, since Beckett is kind of relabeling everything right now with their new slabs. So we'll end up seeing how that goes within the next few months. So next week, I'm going to make a full dedicated video to this. I'm going to keep it brief for this video. And that is paying attention to the eye appeal of a sports card, especially on the vintage side of things. See, not every year is going to be perfectly centered like cards of today. For example, 1957 Topps. A lot of these cards have very poor centering. So if you can find an example that has great centering, there's going to be a premium attached to the card. There was a 57 Clemente that I recently purchased. These cards were comping everywhere from like $250 to $600 on top of my head. However, this card was centered, so the value of this is going to be closer to that $600 value mark instead of $250, which was way off centered. And this applies to a lot of other cards as well. You can have a card with premium centering. Sometimes they can go from anywhere from a 10 to 25% more in value. And if you have a card that has poor centering or is almost miscut, you can look at decreasing all the way up to possibly 30% of the value. It changes from year to year and also depends on the player and grade, with some of the bigger swings happening on those mid-tier grades, especially some of those 4, 5s, and 6s. Sometimes a PSA 5 will look worse than a PSA 3, although technical, like grading side of things, the 3 deserves a 3 and the 5 deserves the 5. However, by looking at it on centering and also colors, maybe the 3 is a better card for your collection. A few more quick tips for you guys. You're going to need one of these and also one of these at a card show or just at home checking over the authenticity of your cards. This is a blacklight. This is a loop, and you can buy both for about $25 or less on Amazon. Blacklight, flash it over a card. If it shows up pretty bright, most likely it is fake. Vintage cards should not do that. This loop, you can look at the print dots on a card, make sure it lines up for the era, and you can look at the edges to see if the cuts are the same all around the card. Really, really helpful to determine if a card has been trimmed or not. And I have a full video on talking about that. Also, you can buy spotting fakes, $20 on Amazon as well. I wrote this whole book talking about different counterfeits, tons of vintage card examples, and have like 50 pages alone on showing you guys the authenticity of vintage sports cards, fake slabs. Tons of videos on the channel. Absolutely, you can watch those for free. But if you want to help support the channel and you want to check out the book, you can grab that as well when you get those other tools. So this next tip, I actually didn't start implementing until I had a YouTube channel and traveled to card shows, but it's not being too attached to your sports cards. You can always trade or sell them. When I bought a card, I did not want to move it. I wanted to throw it in my collection and keep it there forever. However, talking to other collectors that have accumulated some of the best collections out there, it's okay to sell a card. It's okay to trade a card. Let's say, for example, you wanted a 1954 Hank Aaron rookie card, and you have a few 1960s Hank Aaron cards. it's okay to sell or trade those Aaron cards, throw in some cash to upgrade into that Hank Aaron rookie card. You wouldn't have that opportunity without doing that because of cash flow. So always look at trying to upgrade your collection. Try to get into some rare stuff as well. There's stuff in the pre-war side things might only have 25 cards graded or 50 cards graded. Those things don't always make it onto the market. It might take you a year or two. And if you see it at a show or you have the opportunity at a trade night to be able to get that card, make it happen. If you can replace a card in 6 months or a year or 10 months or however long it takes, make that trade. Now, lastly, I'd recommend that you guys take a look at auction houses because they can bring in some really, really unique items. Now, I know the 20% premium that a lot of them have is extremely annoying, especially also with some of their payment methods, some of them not even accepting PayPal or credit card. Super frustrating, but some of them can bring in those rare and niche items or extremely high graded examples. And you're not always going to find those at a card show or a trade night or at other marketplaces. So take a look at the auction houses. They all have their own specific schedules. So I'd recommend that you sign up for their email list so that way you can try to find out when the next auction's happening or occasionally look at the website to see if there has been any updates. Hope this video has been helpful. If it has, make sure to leave a like and also check out my Strongsville card show video linked right over there. This was a full-on vintage sports card show. So every single card that I bought was really old.